Hello and welcome to episode number 49 of Chel Squared. I'm your host, Andrew Chel, and as per usual, we've got a ton to talk about today. By the way, if I sound a little bit like Fran Drescher from The Nanny, I apologize. Been fighting a cold last couple of days, but I'm seeing Slayer after the podcast goes up today. So all in all, can't complain. Pretty good day today. Before I give the usual rundown on the show, just want to say you should follow the podcast on Twitter at Chel Squared and on Facebook at Chel Squared for more hot takes, news by future guests, poll questions, and a whole lot more. If you want to follow my personal Twitter, it's at Chelney Andrew. Please rate the show if you enjoy listening. It means more to me than I can put into words. And as an incentive, I will give you a shout out on social media and on the podcast if you do so. Every time you either like the show on SoundCloud, give it a ring on Apple Podcasts, follow it on Spotify, etc. It makes me feel great. It helps the show out too. Unless Chipotle or the local sushi establishment wants to sponsor me, because I've given them more of my business over the years than I'm willing to admit, I don't make any money off the podcast. This is done out of love in my spare time. So when I see a new reading or review or share or whatever else, I get this big groovy grin on my face that won't leave. So please do that if you haven't already. Also, Chel Squared is a part of National Podcast Network, a new network dedicated to NHL podcasts. Check the show out on there by going to nationalpodcast.network/Chel Squared. And though I am a SiriusXM employee, this podcast is not affiliated in any way with the company. The opinions expressed in this podcast are mine and mine alone, and do not necessarily reflect the views of SiriusXM. If you're angry at my takes, direct them to me and me alone, please and thank you. How about this for a Stanley Cup final, man? 1970 rematch. Blues and the Bruins meet at the big dance once again. Last time they did, Bobby Orr scored that iconic goal, and the Blues haven't been back since. Well, nearly 50 years later, here's St. Louis's try at redemption. How did Boston get here? How did St. Louis get here? Who's the favorite? We will talk about that. And in other big news, The Athletic reported yesterday that the Wild are a team that is very involved in trying to acquire Phil Kessel from the Pittsburgh Penguins. Remember, Kessel has a modified no-trade clause, and according to TSN's Peter LeBrun, Kessel has so far not been super willing to waive it to move to Minnesota, but it's still very, very early in the process, and time will tell. He's making $6.8 million until 2022, and the idea of paying Ryan Suter, Ryan Parise, and now Phil Kessel big bucks is something that I'm not entirely sure would be great for Minnesota, but who knows? The Wild have a lot of cap space, around $21.5 million to be exact, but how much will Kessel really help this team? Remember, their average age is around 29.4. According to NHL numbers, the Wild are tied with the Red Wings for highest average roster age. Does Kessel really move the needle for Minnesota? We'll talk about that, and we'll get into all of that, the poll question, and a whole lot more. Joining Chel Squared today is Blues superfan Cole Padawer. Cole, how are you? Welcome to the show.
I appreciate it, man. I'm on cloud nine right now. I still cannot believe the Blues are in the finals. Oh man, so many years of disappointment, and we're finally here. So hey, I am just happy to be here.
Cole, before we get into the super nitty-gritty here, you are currently in the Middle East. You are in Israel right now. I've seen your posts about staying up until 3, 4, 5 in the morning, watching the Blues on streams. How much does this moment mean to you as a Blues fan?
I was on the ground, full on tears after, about 4 minutes left in the game. And when it finally was, I could finally breathe and I knew we were going on, I can't even put it to words. It's just so many years of disappointment. St. Louis is a great city, and we deserve this. It's going to be great to go up against Boston. A lot of people don't really like Boston. They don't want to see them win a championship. So we got a majority of hockey fans behind us. But it's unbelievable. I can't even put my excitement into words. It's insane.
How much does this mean to the city of St. Louis, the state of Missouri? What does this mean for everybody involved in the region?
It's huge. We're a great baseball town. We're a great hockey town. Especially after we lost the Rams, there was kind of this anger in the city. People were kind of, we felt disrespected. But to see our team here, it means so much to the city. People are rallying around this team. And it's great for the city. It's good. I wish I could be there right now. I'm sure St. Louis is alive, and it sucks I can't be there, but hey, I'll take a cup no matter what. So hopefully we get to see him win the cup, and there's a parade down Market Street, but we'll see.
Last year, before the season began, the Blues got Ryan O'Reilly, and they traded Patrick Berglund, who ended up with 4 points this season, Vladimir Spoka, who had 13 points this season, Tage Thompson, who 12 points and hasn't really been great in Buffalo, and the first round pick, which is either going to be the pick number 30 or pick number 31, and time will tell which pick that is. If you win the cup, it'll be pick number 31. If you lose, it'll be pick number 30. Looking back at this trade, right? Obviously, it's a huge win for St. Louis now. 77 points for Ryan O'Reilly, Selke Trophy nominee. He's been great in the postseason also. But what did that trade do for this team? Obviously, Ryan O'Reilly is a great player, but from the minute it happened until now, what was the feeling that you had and other Blues fans had of, here we go again. This is a big trade that could help. Did we give up too much? Did we give up too little? What was the feeling like before, and what's the feeling like now?
I would say it was excitement. I mean, he's an amazing player, but besides from that, it's Blues fans have been begging Doug Armstrong to make some big moves for a while. He gets a lot of hate sometimes, but I think Doug Armstrong's done an amazing job. But as soon as we made the trade, I knew he was a great defensive player. He brings so much to the team, and as soon as we acquired him, especially for what we gave up, like Blues fans, I know you're not too much in the loop for Blues in Blues Nation, but Berglund's not liked amongst many people. I always liked the guy. I always thought he was good, or at least a good person. I don't know if you'd say he's a great player, but when we made the trade, it was just like, wow, we're finally shaking things up. Like, this is a big move. You gave up one of your top prospects in Thompson. You got rid of Sobotka and Berglund, and then they gave up the pick. It was just like, all right, we're going in for this guy. I was happy for Ryan O'Reilly. I know he gets a lot of heat for his time in Buffalo, and a lot of people are saying that he's like a cancer to the locker room. He's you don't want him there. He's slow, but if you've watched him this year, he's been anything but that. He's seems like a quiet guy, but he says what he needs to say, and he gets the job done. Amazing at faceoffs. He's just brought such a different feel to this team. And it finally feels like we've got, a solid core of centers. But the trade was amazing. As soon as it happened, I was extremely excited.
Take me back to January. Early January, the St. Louis Blues are dead last in the NHL standings. Right? You fire head coach. You bring in Craig Berube, and all of a sudden, you go from dead last in the NHL to not only making the playoffs, but you almost won your division. This has been the wildest ride I've ever seen in professional sports. This is a team that was down and out 3 months before the playoffs were supposed to start, and yet here you are in the Cup final. So take me through this whole process of what the feeling was like in January when you were the last team in the league. Was I assume it was, let's sell everybody, let's rebuild, let's do it the right way, and then Binnington comes in, and then all of a sudden you guys are unbeatable. Take me through that.
I'd rather not think about that time. It wasn't great. It wasn't a great couple months for St. Louis there, but yeah, it was depressing. I'm not gonna sit here and pretend like I saw this happening. I would assume anybody that tells you that is lying. This turnaround's been insane. You got to give most of the credit to Binnington. I think one of the main issues that the Blues have had, not just this year but in years past, is just not consistent goaltending. Like every year we get into the playoffs, it's like it's either Brian Elliott or Jake Allen. Like, can we trust these guys? Can they make the saves? And they weren't bad, but there's just a confidence factor behind Binnington that the players are just rallying around. And it just, when you have confidence in your goalie, you make better plays. You're playing harder for your goalie. And Berube I wasn't sure what to expect, honestly. I was I was like, okay, we got an interim coach. He'll be here for the season. Ride the season out. To be honest with you, I was in full like lose for Hughes mode. I wanted the first overall pick. I was not expecting this, and to see them go from dead last to in the Cup Finals. I mean, man, you can make a movie about this. It's absolutely unreal.
Take me through now the Cup playoffs. First round matchup, obviously the very tough. You got the Winnipeg Jets, who I assume were the favorites coming in. Full disclosure, before the playoffs started on this podcast, on this very show, I said Blues were going to the Cup final. Full disclosure, and now here they are. So I'm 1 for 2 at least. I did say the Lightning were going to be in the Cup final as well, but clearly they are not, and they didn't win a single game. But besides that, the first round matchup, right? You got the Jets. You beat them in 6, which what was surprising to some people. I didn't think it was too surprising. The Winnipeg Jets weren't as good this year, I thought, compared to last year. Then you move on to the Dallas Stars, which was as intensive a series as I've ever seen. It was super back and forth, and no one was going to give anybody anything on the ice. And then Pat Maroon, the hometown hero, scores in overtime in Game 7 to send the Blues to the Western Conference Finals. And then you face San Jose, a team that got lucky against Vegas and got lucky again versus you guys with the hand pass goal. And the Sharks were getting these lucky calls, and then you think, okay, well, here we go again. Here the Sharks go again. And then the injuries started to pile on. Carlson couldn't play anymore. Pavelski was getting decked in the head a couple of times by Blues players. He was not looking good. A couple of other key guys were out, and then the Blues were able to win in 6 games. Take me through this playoff run so far for the Blues, and what you have seen that has worked for this team throughout the playoffs.
All right. Well, yeah, we'll start with the first round. I was right there with you. I thought it was going to be Lightning and Blues, but there was some bias there. Clearly, I just kind of put them in the finals because I'm a Blues fan. I figured might as well go all out for the team. But that first round was I was a little worried. I was a little worried about to see how Binnington performed in the playoffs, but I mean that I wasn't worried after like 2 games. So. Yeah, the first round, it was a tough series against the Jets. It's a good team. Line was, performing. He was doing his thing. But after winning after we got our first 2 wins, I was like, I think we got this. I think it's in the bag. We got it. Moved on to the Stars. That was a tough series. That was that went the full length. That went 7. And like I said before, you could write a movie about this stuff, like the hometown kid getting the Game 7 OT goal to double OT goal to send the Blues to the conference finals. That was a great series. The Stars are a good team. But yeah, that wasn't I was screaming at I think the game ended at like 6:30 in the morning, 7 in the morning here. And people were banging on the walls in my dorm, like, hey, you got to shut up. Like, you're being too loud. Like, I was screaming when we won. That was a great series. And then you go on to the Sharks. And then, yeah, that was an interesting series. I was a little worried after that hand pass. I feel like Blues fans kind of thought they got screwed over there. Which they did, but
you did. You did.
Yeah, we did.
I feel like you can't. I mean, even Sharks fans, if you're arguing about that, then you gotta take the sunglasses off for a little bit and take a look, because that's a bad goal to allow in a Western Conference Finals game, in any game, but especially in a game like that.
Yeah, I mean, and Billy, going off that. I'm under the I have the opinion that if we're gonna review stuff, I think we should just review everything. I understand it's gonna be it's gonna take some time away from the game, but you're seeing it in football where everything's starting to get reviewed, and I mean refs are gonna make mistakes. That was a big mistake, but this stuff has to start getting reviewed. I get there are some rules. I'm not sure if don't take my word for this, but I'm pretty sure I read somewhere that they could have reviewed it, but they chose not to. because they'd never done that before and they didn't want to bring it out in the Western Conference Final.
I don't
in a
believe
big
that's
game.
the case. I think hand passes are unreviewable. I think that's the rule. I mean, you could be right. I could be very much wrong. I'm not exactly sure. But to my knowledge, that kind of play is unreviewable, and that's why they couldn't review it even if they wanted to. I'm sure if they could have done so, they would have, because it was a very clear as day hand pass. So I mean, I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong here, but to my knowledge, that play was unreviewable.
Yeah, I saw something on Twitter. I'm not sure how much credibility that has, but you're probably right. I was under the same assumption as well. I thought that you couldn't review it anyways. So I was angry. It was a big game, and we went down. I think we went down 2-1 after that, I believe.
Yeah,
right?
And that was the last game you lost.
Yeah, and that was the last game we lost. And the way that Binnington came out after that, like you've seen him. He keeps his cool during games. He's he's not nervous, but that he lost it after that, and they were banging on the glass. They were mad. Rightfully so, but that was the first time I'd seen him lose his cool. So I was a little worried going into the next game, but clearly I shouldn't have been worried because he performed amazingly well, and the team rallied around after that game. And I mean, here we are in the finals, but that stuff happens. I get it. It's annoying, but I feel like I'd feel a lot worse if we lost the series. So, we're going to let that one go. Sharks fans have some, they are right in the sense there were, the Blues had a couple of hits that were a little, questionable. I'm saying a little questionable, but I'm sure Sharks fans would, tell me I'm wrong, and it was not questionable.
A lot of them were a lot of questionable. Not gonna pretend to, it's a couple of them were not great. A couple of them were just not good.
Yeah. I mean, if Pavelski comes back and he's not hurt and he plays, the next game, I don't think there's that much outrage. But I mean, still the hit wasn't that great. The Blues wore them down, man. Like, that was this team. I was wondering how they perform, they've never been this far in a long time. So, you think they may be getting tired. There's not too many guys on this team at all. I mean, there might be one that, has played in a cup final. So not too many of those guys have had to play an extra, I don't know how many games they played right now, but yeah, that they look like they have energy, and they look like they're just wearing teams down. They're hitting hard. I mean, you saw that clearly after 3 of their players were out the next game. I mean, obviously, Hurdle took a puck to the face. It's a little different, but man, I've never been so confident in my team before, and that's a little worrying because every time I get confidence, I get disappointed. But honestly, just happy to be in the finals. I would love to see him win, but this is a huge step for the franchise.
Is this Joe Thornton's last game, do you think? Was that his final appearance on Sharks ice, or any ice? I don't think he would leave. There's no I would be super surprised if Joe Thornton would sign with a different team. But he's getting up there in age. I think he's 40 years old right now, and the speculation was all throughout the playoffs was, is this his last rodeo? And is it? He's obviously still a pretty, solid player and everything, but if you take a look at his face during the final and during the playoff race, he looked exhausted. He looked like a worn human being, and I wouldn't be surprised if this was his final shot at the cup, at least as a player. I would be even more surprised if he retires and San Jose doesn't bring him back in some capacity, either, I don't even know, as an advisor, as a scout, or he's gonna have a job in San Jose, and there's I would be very surprised if that wasn't the case. But in your opinion, is this Joe Thornton's last ride? Is he done?
I would hate to see him retire. He's one of the NHL's all-time greats, but I mean, like you said, he looked dead. Like, I'm not sure if it's just because of that massive beard, or he just looked exhausted. And if you look at the Sharks next year, I mean, they got some they have some cap issues to work around. You got to get Pavelski signed. Carlson's probably gone. I mean, this felt like it was his last push, or the Sharks' last push with Thornton. I don't think he'll sign anywhere else. I agree with you on that. But yeah, I don't know. How old is he now? Is he 41, 40?
So something along those lines. Yeah, he's up there.
Yeah, I mean, he's old. So like, if the Sharks don't even have the team to,
he's 39. He's gonna be 40 on July 2nd. Joe Thornton.
Okay, yeah, so he'll be 40 going into the next year. I mean, I feel bad. Like, he's one of the legends of the NHL.
Absolutely.
I feel bad that he probably won't get a cup. But I mean, if Jarome Iginla didn't get a cup, then like, hey, like, no one really deserves a cup until you win it. So yeah, I hope he doesn't retire. But I mean, he didn't even perform that bad this year. He had a good amount of points. He's still a good player. It's just, does he want to come back to a team that is going to look completely different next year and might not have as much firepower?
Craig Adams has more rings than Iginla and Thornton combined. So that's always fun to see that someone like a role player like Craig Adams has more rings than some of the all-time greats like Iginla and Thornton and those guys. I mean, it's the way the cookie crumbles sometimes, but man, it's tough to know that is a fact sometimes,
Yeah.
But jumping to the Eastern Conference here, the Boston Bruins. I said this last week on the show. It wasn't a surprise that they are in the final because they weren't a surprise throughout the year. They were tied for the second best team in the regular season. The only reason why the Bruins weren't a favorite day one of the playoffs was because the Lightning won 62 games and then they were the force to be reckoned with. But as soon as they were swept, which is still a fact that is crazy to me. I don't think I'll ever get over it, nor will Lightning fans. That this juggernaut of a team showed up in the first game, right? Showed up in the first period of the first game, scored 3 goals, and that was it. And then they just decided to pack it in, and it was over. And it's a very strange 4 games for the Lightning. But as soon as they got swept, as soon as they got removed from the playoffs, you have to think that the Boston Bruins looked around and said, "Okay, who do we have left? Who can beat us right now?" And you saw the big teams fall. You saw Toronto get beaten by the Boston Bruins. You saw the Cup champion Caps get removed, get knocked out in double overtime of Game 7. You saw the Penguins get swept. You saw the Flames get down in 5. You saw all these big teams start to fall. And for the Boston Bruins, you looked around and Andrew Pissarro, who was on the show last week, and I were talking about this. We were talking about how Boston looked around and they said, "Oh well, this is our time now. This is our shot." Andrew said that last week on the show. They looked around as a team and they went, the Lightning are out, the Caps are out, the Penguins are out, the Flames are out, everybody's out. We could do this. And it to me, it's not surprising that because the Lightning are out, that the Bruins are the favorites, and I feel like they should get more credit for that reason. They made the Columbus series look relatively easy. They made Carolina series look super easy, even though the Hurricanes were playing a great style of hockey right before that series, obviously beating the Cup champions. They swept the Islanders. They were looking real good, and the Bruins came into Carolina, came into Boston, and showed them what's for, and swept them, and they swept them in return. So this is a team that, as soon as the Lightning were out, I feel like the consensus should have been, all right, well, this is pretty much over. The Bruins are gonna make the final, and now here they are, a rematch of the 1970 final, and as I'm sure you well know, Bobby Orr and that series with that iconic goal and then that celebration at the end, and now 49 years later, here's a rematch.
Yeah, I mean the Bruins once that first round was over, I don't think anybody really knew what to expect in the playoffs. Like you said, the Lightning were out, Penguins were out, Caps were out, I believe, right? They lost to Carolina in the first round. Yeah, I mean, after that first series, I mean, I'm sure the Bruins looked around and said, "Hey, like this is a nicer path to the finals than we expected." But that the Bruins are a scary team. I mean, Tuukka Rask is playing out of his mind. I'm surprised. I didn't know he got that much hate, or not hate, but he gets a lot of heat in Boston from fans, and he's performing at like what is it, a 9.48 save percentage right
He's
now in the
got a
playoffs? Like,
942 save percentage right now, which is why if you take a look at the previous times that the Boston Bruins have made the final, Tim Thomas was writing a 930, I think 930 something, and then Tuukka Rask in 2013 was also writing that sort of save percentage, and now in 2019 the same thing is going on. The Bruins are writing a white hot goaltender in the Cup final.
yeah, it's going to be a Binnington versus Rask. It's going to be a duel. I'm excited to see it. I'm not gonna lie, I haven't really watched a lot of the Bruins games. It's kind of hard with the time difference here. So I mean, I'm up for Blues games, but if I was home, I'd be watching every playoff game possible. But yeah, it's just not feasible to do that here. So I can't say that I know the team well enough to have an informed opinion. But I mean, from what I've seen, Tuukka Rask playing out of his mind. Marchand is amazing at what he does. I'm in the minority here. I think Marchand's great for the game. I think what he does, he plays his role, and he's the villain. He has a little bit of dirty moments every once in a while, but I think guys in the NHL need to have more of a personality. I think you see it in the NBA, and that's what makes the league so big and so much more fun to watch. And I think guys like Marchand are in a way good for the league. The team's good. It's going to be a battle. I haven't watched him enough, like I said, but I'm excited to see how this goes. This is definitely the scariest matchup we've had in the playoffs so far. But I also think the Bruins haven't really had too hard of a time with any of these teams. I mean, yeah, they beat the Leafs, and that was a little bit of a battle. But I mean, hey, if you're an NHL fan, you kind of expect them to beat the Leafs in round one. But they played well against the Blue Jackets. And then they swept the Hurricanes. But like those are good teams. Like, not taking anything away from them, but they haven't had to play, solid, like I don't know how to describe it. I just feel like they haven't had too hard of a time with these teams. So I think this is going to be a big matchup for them. I always like playing teams in the East. You don't get to see it too often. Like during the regular season, especially not in the playoffs, because haven't done this since 1970. But yeah, we haven't played the Bruins in the finals since 1970, and that iconic goal was scored. But let's not forget that the league was a little bit different back then.
Sure.
I think it was
absolutely
was the expansion teams were in their own conference, and then they went up against the Bruins and got swept. Yeah, Sportsnet put out a reminder that said, the Blues have never won a Stanley Cup final game ever, and they've been in the finals 3 times. So, if Blues fans didn't know that already, then there's your reminder. So yeah, it's gonna be awesome. Like I'm so excited for this series. I'm not gonna. I would like to say I'm happy to be here, and I won't be that mad if they lose, because we made it. And it's a big step for the franchise. I mean, yeah, I will be disappointed, but like just being able to watch my team in the finals, it's an unbelievable experience. I wish I could be home for it. My dad's been going to the games. He was at Game 6, and he said he looked around, and everybody above the age of like 18 was crying. Like, this is a big deal, and I think Boston's going to run into a team that it looks like they have something to prove, and it's going to be a Rask versus Binnington duel.
This leads me to my poll question. Now, it was a little skewed because you retweeted it and you are a Blues fan.
Yeah.
So it got a little skewed, but that's okay. Which team is lifting Lord Stanley, and how many games will it take? The 4 choices are Bruins in 4 or 5, Bruins in 6 or 7, Blues in 4 or 5, or Blues in 6 or 7. Now, this poll got almost 200 votes, and tell me which of the 4 you chose before I tell you which of the 4 is in the lead right now. I feel like you could probably take a guess, as I'm sure a lot of Blues fans voted in this poll. But which of the 4 would you choose?
I chose Blues in 6 or 7. But yeah, there is obviously bias there. 69% of people voted for that one. I can see it right now. Nice, but that's
playing spoilers, man. Come on,
Oh,
you
I'm sorry.
spoiled the poll.
I'm sorry. It was funny. I just thought I had to say it before. I'm sure people will check later. It'll be different, but I had to say it now. Yeah, I chose Blues in 6. Obviously, I'm a Blues fan, so that's going to be my choice. I'd like to see it get done in 4, like every other Blues fan, but Boston's going to be a battle. Like they're not an easy team, so we'll see.
Actually, there's a couple of more people that voted in the poll since you last said the numbers. So 67% of people now are saying Blues in 6 or 7. So that number's going down. 18% are saying Bruins in 6 or 7. Bruins in 4 or 5 are in third with 8% of the vote, and then Blues in 4 or 5 are last with 7% of the vote. Now again, the poll is a little bit skewed, but that's okay. I know you're picking the Blues, obviously, because you're a Blues fan. For me, for someone that doesn't have a horse in this race, this matchup to me is so close. There's so many things that both teams do well in, and they excel at, and obviously, if they're at this point, then they have done a lot of things well. But these teams are such a difficult matchup for each other that it's so tough to say without watching them play a game yet to say, oh well, the Bruins have this or the Blues have this, or list the reasons why Team A has an advantage over Team B in this particular situation, because we haven't seen this matchup in this particular context in almost 50 years. So it's not like we've seen the Hawks year after year. It's not like we've seen the Penguins year after year. Well, we sort of at least have an idea of, okay, this is what to expect. This is what this team does well in at this point in time, and then we can go from there. We haven't seen that from either of these teams. The Bruins have obviously been in the situation more recently than the Blues have. But even then, that was 6 years ago. It was a totally different team, totally different coach, different system, different everything. Besides the goaltending and a couple of key guys, the Bruins are a different team. So to suggest that, oh well, they did X, Y, and Z well 6 years ago, well they're going to do it this year. I don't think that's the right way to go about this. So to me, I can't pick a favorite or at least a team that I think is going to win until I at least see how game 1 goes. And not even looking at the score, looking at how these teams play against each other, how they match up, what their strengths are, what their weaknesses are, how Binnington's gonna play in game 1, how Rask is gonna play in game 1. There's so many different variables in this matchup that I hesitate to crown a champion before the series has begun, because one, they play what, twice a season? Yep. During the regular season, they don't play a lot. They don't play each other a lot. So that matchup is rare to begin with, and now we're going to see it in the Cup final. It's going to be I don't think it's going to be less than 6. There's no way this series ends in less than 6 games, unless something ridiculous happens or Rask gets injured. But even if Rask gets injured, you have Halak, who has been keeping Rask fresh and good to go during the regular season because he was able to play so many games and play so well during the times that he was in the crease for. And you have Binnington, who has played a lot of games since January, but even then, he looks fantastic. He looks as if he hasn't played a game all year, and he looks great. And I love Binnington's celebrations after they win the series. My favorite is going on Twitter and seeing the tweets of the goalie cam after the Blues win, after the Blues won Game 6, after the Blues won in Game 7. Binnington just kind of hits his stick along the goalpost and then just skates off to meet his team. There's no celebration. There's no happiness. It's like, all right, well, we won. Let's move on. Which I thought was pretty interesting. But in terms of matchups, I can't pick until at least after game 1, and even then, it's going to be tough.
Yeah. Oh, the goalie cam celebrations are amazing. I mean, like this dude's he's about his business. He does what needs to get done, then he skates off. Like I think it was after was it? It might have been. I forgot what game it was, but there was a game where they won and Binnington just skated off the ice. Like he was like, "All right, we're done. Let's go," and they just skated off the ice. Like he does not. It's almost like he's a robot. Like it's insane. But yeah, I agree with you. I haven't seen it. Like I said, I haven't seen enough about the Bruins, even in the playoffs. But like let's not forget, like yeah, the Bruins are one of the best teams in the league right now, and they were amazing during the regular season. But like after January, I think the Blues had the best record after January, and that's a team that's been riding that wave for a while. So it's going to be interesting. I chose Blues in 6 or 7 because obviously I have a bias. And you said there's no way it could end in 4. Hey, I mean, not to put my tinfoil hat on or anything, but I mean, who was it? There was the Islanders swept the Penguins in round 1.
Right.
Then the Islanders got swept by the Hurricanes, and then the Bruins swept the Hurricanes. So hey, I mean, that's a nice pattern if I do say so myself, but you never know. I don't think it's not gonna end in 4. It's gonna be a battle, but yeah, I'm expecting an amazing series. I'm gonna be so excited watching my team. Like I've never seen them in my lifetime. Not even my dad's seen it in his lifetime. Like I mean, they have not. Like we haven't seen the Blues in the finals in at least for most of history, but it's just gonna be so cool to watch. Like I am just gonna be happy watching the games. I'm gonna be freaking out. Like my heart rate will be at a dangerously high level, but I'm excited to watch it.
Are you going to be traveling to St. Louis by any chance to catch a finals game if the opportunity arises, or are you staying in Israel?
I got to say here, I'm doing an internship during the summer, so I don't think that's going to be possible. Let alone is that in my budget? That's like I think it's like a $1,400 flight.
Yikes! Yikes!
Yeah,
That's not great.
No, it's probably not going to happen. But I always had this vision that I'd be at the Cup final. My dad and I watching the game, just like ready to see us like lift the cup. But yeah, I mean, I can't get mad though. If we win the cup, we win the cup. Like it doesn't matter if I'm in Israel or if I'm in the States. Like it. I honestly can't even think about it because it just gives me chills. Like it would be the coolest thing ever. Like as a diehard Blues fan, like I just need one cup. Like I just need one. And then after we get one, I can go about my life as like a free man. Like I feel like I have this like cloud over me like at all times in my life. I just need to hit the peak once, and I can, go about my daily business without without a constant reminder that my team's never won at all, especially from Blackhawks fans. Like, hey, Blackhawks fans I love them, but they give us a lot of flack about not having a cup. So it would be nice to be like, hey, we finally got one. I'm assuming it's going to be the equivalent of like when the Cubs won the World Series. Not as long, obviously, but yeah. I mean, everyone says we're the Chicago Cubs of hockey, so maybe that hopefully that whole story ends up true and we actually get one. So we'll see.
I'm going to quote the great Bruce Dickinson of Iron Maiden here, because you said you're going to be a free man. So this is off of The Number of the Beast, the iconic album from Iron Maiden in 1982, 83. We share a birthday. That's all I know about that. That's all I know about that. That's one of my all-time favorite albums. One of a couple of lines from that song is, "I'm not a prisoner. I'm a free man. My blood is my own now. Don't care what the past was. I know where I'm going." So that pretty much sums up what you what you just said for the most part.
That's a golden quote.
It's I totally feel where you're coming from. I mean, I haven't witnessed a cup win 22, but I fortunately watched the refs and Dwight King ruin it for the Rangers in 2014, and I will always hate those refs and Dwight King for that. That was goalie interference in game 2. I will take that to my grave no matter what. That was an truly off. It was a combination of Alain Vigneault's atrocious defensive deployment, as Philadelphia fans will soon find out. And a combination of that and just terrible officiating and Dwight King. I'm not getting get into Dwight King. Keeping it PG for the kids
Yep.
here. I'm not. But I'm still super salty about.
Not a fan of Dwight King. It's
No.
okay.
I
It's
could
understandable.
Yeah, I'm at least on the ice. I've never met him off the ice. He could be a great guy for all I know. I don't know, but at least as a player, I am not a fan of Dwight King. And speaking of one of the teams that got swept, as you mentioned a little bit earlier, the Pittsburgh Penguins, they are now in a crossroads because this team did not win a playoff game, and now Phil Kessel didn't play well, and now there's a lot of speculation that he's going to be traded. Now, there's a report yesterday from The Athletic that the Minnesota Wild are super deep into wanting to trade for Phil Kessel, which I'm not sure would be great for Minnesota. I don't know what this trade would entail. There was a couple of names being thrown around. I saw Jason Zucker. I saw even Jack Johnson. First of all, Minnesota. If you are willingly trading for Jack Johnson with that contract, are you okay?
There's a problem there.
Blink twice if you need help, because this is a problem. You gave away Nino Niederreiter for Victor Rask, right? You traded you traded for Kevin Fiala. You traded away Mikael Granlund, which two trades which I still don't really understand. And now you want Jack Johnson? Please, if you need help, if you fall and you can't get up, I mean, call Life Alert, call whoever you need to call, because this is a problem. This is a problem. GM Fenton needs to, I don't know what he needs to do, but he needs to figure it out quickly. For the Wild, I mean, you got Zach Parise and Ryan Suter tied up in identical contracts, around $7.5 million until 2025. They're 34 years old already, so they're locked up for the next 6 years. And you have a couple of other guys that you know they're making okay money. Matt Dumba making $6 million until 2023, which is fair because Matt Dumba is pretty good at his job. He's 24 years old. Fine. And the Wild have $21.5 million in cap space, according to Cap Friendly, of course. So they have space, but they're also tied with the Red Wings for oldest average age on the roster. Phil Kessel's 31 years old. I mean, he's obviously still a great player and great shooter and all that, but how much does he really move the needle for Minnesota? What does you know, he's going to bring the offense, he's going to bring all that, but does he really help this team right now in this situation? Is he really the solution? Because I don't think so.
He's a great player. I've always liked Phil Kessel. I tweeted out, like, I'm not sure how long ago, but I said, hey, I'd love for the Blues to get a guy like Phil Kessel. He is 31, but he still brings it. He's a great player. I don't know if it moves the needle, but like you said, they have, you know, Parise and Suter locked up for a while. They have an older team, so if you're gonna make the push, you might as well make the push. The Sharks did it this year. They went out and got Carlson. They got Evander Kane, I believe that was last year. You got to make that push if you want to make it to the Cup. Like, I hope it moves the needle for him, because I mean, as a Blues fan, you got to have some have some sympathy for the Wild. Like, that's a town or a city that, you know, or I guess the whole state in general, it's a big hockey area, and like, they deserve something. And, you know, that team just, I feel like they disappoint a lot too. So you would hope that it moves the needle for them. This is hypothetically speaking, if they even get Phil Kessel. But I think it would help. I think having a guy like Phil on the team, especially after, you know, having the Cup experience, it would help. And that brings a good veteran presence to the locker room. And he'll play like Phil Kessel. So, I mean, I hope it moves the needle for it if they get him. They have cap space. I wasn't aware that they had that much cap space. So, I mean, good for them. They can make some moves. But, you know, there's question marks there. But like I said, I hope that team gets a Cup one day. So we'll see.
Well, you take a look at some of the other moves that were happening right around the league at at the deadline and around the deadline. What did the Bruins do? They traded for Charlie Coyle, who is not a huge name, but is a name that has fit super well in Boston. And they traded for Marcus Johansson, Mojo, who again isn't the biggest name, especially since being traded to New Jersey. He was still a great player. He was still a pretty good player there, but the notion of a top player, neither of these guys are elite superstars. And yet they fit so well in the Bruins system that you take a look and you go, those were great moves for the Boston Bruins. And I feel like this is going to be more of a pattern. At least that would be the hope. Moving forward is that teams don't necessarily go for the biggest names. You got Winnipeg trading for everybody and anybody. You got the Sharks trading for Nyquist instead of trading for a goaltender, which is still, I probably should have traded for Jimmy Howard. I don't
know if Jimmy Howard helps there, but I get your point.
Better than Martin Jones. That's for sure. He played very well down the stretch, and I will give him credit for that, especially down 3-1 in the series against Vegas, down at certain points in the rest of the playoffs. He played well, but then there were other points in time where he just did not do his job well. And at least in my mind, Jimmy Howard or a Jimmy Howard-like goaltender would have done a better job, at least positioning-wise. I mean, obviously, we don't know, would Jimmy Howard have stopped all the shots that Martin Jones gave up? No, obviously, we don't know that. We never will. But there were a couple of goals, a couple of situations where Martin Jones was either in bad positioning or just or too aggressive or too conservative, or just he wasn't in the right spot at the right time, and the puck went in. And I feel like if it was Jimmy Howard or somebody like Jimmy Howard, my mind goes to Jimmy Howard because I feel like Detroit, he has a favorable contract. He's not a super young goaltender, so he would have been a nice rental for the Sharks. He would have been a nice fit there. But I feel like someone like a Jimmy Howard would have benefited the Sharks in the playoffs. If anything, if nothing else, at least as a backup you can trust. If you want to roll Martin Jones, fine, you roll Martin Jones. But I would trust Jimmy Howard as a backup way more than I do, a lot of the other goalies in the NHL, and certainly more than Aaron Dell. And there's I mean, this is obviously on the past here, but I mean, should have traded for Jimmy Howard. Anyway, you get Karlsson, you trade for Nyquist, and yet they didn't get to the final, right? Obviously, every team that trades for players isn't going to make the final, right? Only 2 teams get the opportunity to play in the Cup final. But at the end of the day, Boston didn't trade for a Karlsson. Well, San Jose signed Karlsson, but you get my point. They didn't trade for the biggest names. They didn't give up 17 first-round picks. They didn't give up half their farm system to get the big name. And yet it's been working out for them. They were a great team before they got Coyle and Mojo, but now they got better. And it wasn't the huge name that got them to this point. It was everybody working together in unison and to get to this point, and Coyle being a good fit, Mojo being a good fit in that system, in that city. And this is probably going to be, at least in my hope, that this becomes more of a trend as the years go by. Hey, maybe don't go for the shiny name when you could go for a player that fits your system better and could potentially help you in those specific moments where you need your system to prevail. And in Boston's case, at least, well, it definitely has. And in St. Louis's case, Ryan O'Reilly was a big name, but he was mistreated in Buffalo, right? He wanted out of Colorado, got to Buffalo, was mistreated there, and now he fits in St. Louis. He was a big name, but he's a big name that fits the system. And that goes, at least in my mind, that goes a long way, right? You could be a big name, but if you fit in the system, you fit in the culture, you fit in the city, that outweighs being a huge name, in my opinion, at least.
Yeah, definitely. Ryan O'Reilly has I love the guy. Like, he's a hard worker. I have no complaints about him. But I think you're right, and I hope this is a trend. I honestly just hope that more teams I like what the Sharks did. You really don't know what could happen if they didn't get injured. Like, Pavelski, Carlson, and Hurdle were all out for Game 6.
Right.
So, like, that's a team that it's dangerous if they're all on the ice and if they're all healthy. So sometimes it's a little bit of injury luck that gets you to the finals. But I don't think that I do agree with you that I hope teams start doing, trades that fit the system, and obviously it works. I would just like to see more trades in general. Like, how many times we sat there on trade deadline day, just staring at Twitter and NHL Network or whatever you're watching it on, and just nothing happens. Like, nothing significant, no trades, no significant trades, nothing crazy. And you're just like, well, that was kind of a waste of time. I keep comparing this to the NBA, but like, the NBA is a league driven by superstars, and it's entertaining to watch. And it's because these teams make big trades all the time. Like, you don't see that in the NHL where, a player, like, I'm trying to think of something real fast, but like, big names get traded like nothing. And I think, and the NHL GMs are obviously a little bit more conservative. Draft picks are a little bit different because not every, NHL draft pick pans out. So you got to watch that. But like, you would hope that teams start doing this more. And if you're a team that thinks you can make a run, then you make a trade. Like, if you see someone that can help you, then go for it. But I've also seen Doug Armstrong he's almost as conservative as it gets. Like, this guy doesn't make a lot of trades. Like, I can't remember that many significant trades in my life. Besides, they traded for Ryan Miller, and that went terribly. And like, besides that, like, he hasn't really done anything crazy. And so he found a guy that he likes, that fits the system, and he knew that he'd be a good fit here, and they made the trade. So, I like the trend. I hope it continues. But yeah, like, in terms of just bringing it back to the Wild, and the Phil Kessel talk, like, I think it'd be a good fit. Like, Phil's an American hockey hero. Like, Minnesota's a great town, or a great place for him to play. Like, I think it's a good fit. But I do think teams need to start, going all in. And if you think you're going to make a cup run, then go for it. If you don't believe in your own team and you don't think you can, get a player that will help you, like, I don't know if you really think you're even going to win the cup. So I don't know. We'll see. I hope it's a trend that continues, but I'm not sure it's likely. But I think if the Blues or the Bruins, I guess one of the teams have to win. So, like, it's going to be a trend that works. So we'll see.
Well, in terms of the NBA, right, they are a star-driven league because there's only, so many players on a team, right? And the superstars play for the majority of the game. And in a sport like hockey, where it's a lot more luck driven, right? In basketball, it's skill driven, in that if you have 4 superstars or 5 on the floor like the Warriors did, if KD's healthy and Boogie's healthy, then you're gonna dominate, right? You can have, but there's a lot of cases where you have all-star caliber teams in the NHL, and they haven't done anything. It's a lot of, and also in basketball, if there's no puck, there's no ice jumping, you know what I mean? Like, the puck jumps a lot on the ice. There's puck jumps over the stick, or there's bounces, and there's this and that. In basketball, you have the ball, and if you're accurate, you're gonna score, and if you're not, you're not gonna score. There's none of that intrinsic luck or that intrinsic bounce to be had, unless, of course, you're Kawhi Leonard in Game 7 versus the 76ers, in which case that was a lot of luck.
Yeah,
that was a lot of luck. That was a phenomenal shot and an all-time shot, and that shot will be played for the rest of the time. But that was lucky for sure. But overall, the NBA is definitely more superstar. Well, also, the NBA has shorter contracts, right? You can only have a super max deal in the NBA if you make the All NBA team, and even then, the contracts don't get as long as hockey contracts. So you don't see a 7-year deal in the NBA. You don't see that. You don't see the 8 the 9 million the 8-9 year deals that the NHL has, which has sort of gotten smaller in recent years, but as still that number is still there. And you don't see that in the NBA. So, which is why the idea of trading superstars in the NBA, at least part of it, is that's the reason, because teams don't have these anchor contracts for at least most of the time, right? For the as an example, the Celtics have Hayward, who they signed to a huge deal, and then he got that horrific injury in his first game as a Celtic, and he hasn't been the same player since, and he's still getting paid a lot more than someone of a similar role would get paid, but that's not his fault. He got that terrible injury. But for the most part, the contracts are 2, 3, 4 years. They're not longer than that. And in hockey, a 4-year deal is pretty standard. It's 4 or 5-year deal. If you're looking to sign a guy long term, especially if they're young, you want a 6-year deal for Matt Dumba. You want a 7-year deal for Brett Pesce. You want these guys locked up long term. And so the idea of trading these contracts becomes tougher. And also in the NBA, they have a soft salary cap. Hockey does not have that. So it's tougher to trade those guys because they intrinsically have a higher salary, and trading guys with high salary in a hard salary cap sport is not easy.
No, I agree with everything you just said, 100%. What I mean by more like the NBA in that sense is the excitement level. Everything you just said is 100% valid, and I agree with it. I was looking at it more of I just see how the NBA is able to grow the game and how big it's gotten internationally, and how big the sport is. And obviously, the NHL has the same sort of goal to grow the game, make it bigger. I just think that the NBA does a good job with their league, and the trades that they make are exciting. And it's teams aren't afraid to pull the trigger on somebody. But like you just said, everything you just said is right. So I agree with you in that aspect. But just from a growing the game standpoint and just the excitement level, I think it'd be cooler just to have the teams trading. But this is coming from a fan and not a GM who has to look at has to look at the salary cap and how much money the team's generating. There are a lot of factors there, but I was just putting it out there as it'd be cooler to see, but I get what you're saying. So we'll see how it goes, but I hope the trend does continue with teams picking up players at the deadline. I hate watching, like I said earlier, I hate watching NHL Network and nothing happens as I sat there for 6 hours. So we'll see.
Game 1 of the Stanley Cup final, Monday night at 8 p.m. my time. I think it's 3 a.m. New York time. So
yes, sir.
So that's gonna be a tough one. But hey, you said early in the episode that you were up till 6:30 in the morning watching these games. So 3 a.m. isn't too bad anymore. But Cole, this has been an awesome conversation. Really appreciate having you on. Plug your social media, plug whatever you want to plug, and I'll talk to you again real soon.
Final words. I got to bring this up. I am so happy for Tyler Bozak and Ryan O'Reilly and the guys that we brought in. I think that, Bozak, when he signed here, said, I'm here to win a cup. That's your headline. Print it. Man, I'm so happy for these guys. So just wanted to say that as a Blues fan, it makes me so happy. I'm so excited. It doesn't even feel real. So I'll be up at 3 a.m. Hopefully the game doesn't go to triple overtime or anything, because I got to get some sleep. It's absurd. But if anyone wants to follow me, I try to talk about more than just the Blues, but lately it's been just the Blues. But social media is Cole Padawer, so ColePadawer. But yeah, I appreciate you having me on, man. I love talking about the Blues. So any chance I can get to brag about my team being in the finals, I'm definitely gonna do it.
Awesome. Thanks, Cole. Really appreciate it. And this has been episode number 49 of Chel Squared, episode number 50, the Big 5-0. Coming up next week. I'll talk to you then.